Evening, everyone. Council met in closed session, and I will now ask the clerk to provide the closed session report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council met in open session at 6:30 and passed a motion to go into closed session to receive information and provide staff with direction to the mayor and CAO to execute a new collective agreement with CUPE.
And I'll ask everyone to please stand for the national anthem. Okay, we would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather as the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples, acknowledging the One Bowl and Spoon Treaty. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? No. Okay. Please note that all these meetings proceedings are being broadcast live, recorded, and made available through the Township website and YouTube. I've been involved recently with some preliminary discussions on ensuring the continued provision of emergency room services and urgent care services for the citizens of Wainfleet at the Welland Hospital, as well as other sites in South Niagara. Our next regular meeting of council will be held Tuesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. There will also be a special meeting of council held February 28th at 7 p.m. where we will be considering the operating budget. Special meetings are not typically live streamed, however, they are open to the public to attend. Are there any announcements or remarks from members of council? Councilor McKellen?
You, Mr. Mayor, recently read that Mayor Frank Campion is putting up quite a stink about this, how hospitals in South Niagara. I think we should either all get on board with him or at least get letters out to the ministers in Niagara Health System that we demand a hospital in South Niagara. So I don't know if we want to just write him a letter, or if we all get behind him and go to as many meetings as we can and go to as much, because we need hospitals down here. This is just not right. So,
any other comments or remarks? I have a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council held January 10th, 2023, and the minutes of special meeting of council held January 31st be adopted and circulated. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Gilmore, Councillor Anderson. Any other discussion? No. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, in accordance with the Planning Act, a public meeting is held for applicants to present information regarding the proposed applications to the public and council. Council will also receive comments from the public. Staff will not make a recommendation, and council will not make a decision on the proposed applications at this evening's public meeting. A planning report will be brought forward by staff and considered by council at a later date. As a member of the public, you are welcome to request to be notified of any future meetings respecting the proposed applications. Please provide your contact information on the sign-in sheet located at the back of council chambers. Please be advised that the sign-in information will form part of the public record for these applications. I will now ask the planner to provide details on the purpose of this proposed applications and any written comments received.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to all of council. So I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the applications. The applicant's consultant, Mr. Craig Rowe from Upper Canada, is also here this evening and will be making a presentation following me. So the subject lands are located on the southwest corner of Zion Road and Highway 3, located within the hamlet of Hendershot Corners. The subject lands are designated as village residential, with a portion designated as environmental protection area under the township's official plan, and zone development and hazard under zoning bylaw 58178. So the draft plan of subdivision application proposes 6 lots for single detached dwellings and accessing and fronting onto Zion Road, and then 1 block for an environmental protection area. Again, that's located in the southwest corner of the subject lands. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment application proposes to rezone the property from development and hazard to residential R1-359 and introduce an environmental protection area and maintain the hazard area. So exception 359 permits a minimum lot frontage of 27 meters. The applications have been circulated to various external agencies and internal departments. I have some comments were received in time for the public meeting. So the Ministry of Transportation noted no objection in principle. They did request 4 conditions of approval regarding a stormwater management report, detailed grading and servicing plans, traffic impact study, and any legal agreements that the ministry deems necessary. Bell Canada requested some conditions of approval, and this was regarding required easements and responsibilities should there be any conflict with existing facilities in the area. Enbridge Gas noted no objection. The Township Drainage Department noted that the property is assessed to both the Ellsworth and Big Forks drain, and that any parcel boundary changes need to be captured under the Drainage Act. It was also noted that if stormwater is to drain to the Ellsworth drain, that the capacity of the drain be analyzed to prove it's a sufficient.
Members of council, nice to be here. My first time with a new term of council. My name is Craig Rowe. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants. We're a land use planning and engineering firm based out of Niagara. Our office is at 30 Hanover Drive in the city of St. Catharines. So it's my intention this evening just to provide a little bit more of a detailed overview of the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment that are before the township right now. I have a brief presentation with some diagrams that will hopefully provide a little bit more context to everything. So the subject lands for this application are located at the corner of Zion Road and Highway 3. They're located within the Hendershot Corners hamlet, which is a settlement area under planning policy. The subject lands are also designated as village residential, which allows them to be contemplated for residential development purposes. The zoning on the subject land, which I'll touch on in a moment, is still under the old bylaw as the settlement area. Zoning hasn't been settled yet with the township and their outstanding OLT hearing. So these zoning amendments are to the older zoning bylaw. So in terms of the application itself, it is a draft plan of subdivision, and it's seeking to facilitate the development of 6 lots for single detached dwellings and then 1 block for environmental protection. So the intention of the application that's before the municipality is that block for environmental protection has been assessed through an environmental impact study and deemed to contain a provincially significant wetland. So typically we tend to dedicate those features to the local municipality, but we'll of course be having discussions with the planning department to see if that is something that the township would be interested in at the time. So concurrently, as council will consider the draft plan of subdivision, you'll also be considering a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment. And what this zoning bylaw amendment is going to do is it's going to reflect the developable area as confirmed through the environmental study and designate it residential 1 zone with that 359 provision, which allows for a reduced frontage. The main frontage requirement in the zoning bylaw is 46 meters, or about 150 feet. So this is reducing down to 27, which is a little bit more common for a residential lot. It doesn't need that large expansive frontage, but these lots do have a deep a lot of depth to them heading from east to west, so they're able to make up a reasonable lot size to accommodate a house, septic, and amenity. So this is the draft plan, as you can see here. So kind of cascading from the top to bottom. There's 4 lots which are generally situated north of the provincially significant wetland. There is lot 5, which is on the east and a little bit of the north and west side of the wetland. And then lot 6, which is down at the corner. And then, of course, on the other side of the subject lands near Highway 3, those are MTO owned lands. And a portion of the Ellsworth Drain is down in the bottom there, is proposed to be designated as hazard. And then block 7, which would be that environmental block, is the outline of that would be the bold image. I think there's a laser on here. There might be, yes. This bold line here, that would be the extent of the block, not the other boundary. That's a 30-meter total setback from the wetland, 15 from the buffer that's provided. All septic systems got to be kept out of that, so that's why that's demonstrated on the plan for you at this time. So in terms of putting this application forward to the municipality, there are a variety of technical studies and considerations that were required to be dealt with and then submitted with the applications. The first was the completion of a noise study, given the proximity of proposed residential land uses next to Highway 3. Based on that study that was completed, the recommendations are just for standard air conditioning in all of the housing and to use standard Ontario Building Code compliant materials. That'll provide enough noise suppression for the noise generated by the adjacent roadway. A hydrogeological study was also undertaken, as the proposed lots are going to be under 1 hectare in size. This is permitted under township policy, subject to the completion of a hydrogeological study. Through that study, the proposed lot sizes that are on the plan have been supported, subject to the installation of septic systems that have a 50% nitrogen removal element to them. And all the water sources for this will be private cisterns with all of the dwellings. There was also an environmental impact study done. This study was completed by Ecological Environmental Solutions along with LCA Consulting. And what they completed was an overall assessment of the subject lands and the adjacent lands themselves, delineating what features were on site. In this case, it consisted of primarily the provincially significant wetland, some significant woodlands, and some other habitat features out in that area. We had a very productive call with the MPCA in Niagara Region, who provided us some preliminary comments about their interpretation of the EIS and just some clarifications. There's some additional field work that's being done. I believe they're going out hopefully this week or next week to do a walkabout, and then we'll be touching base again with those review agencies and township staff as well to see if any adjustments are required to the plan itself. And then lastly, a transportation impact study has been requested by the MTO as part of their conditions of approval. We thought it prudent to take care of this right away, just in case it led to any additional conditions of approval from the township or other agencies. Essentially, they've asked us to take a look and see if there's any turning movement improvements required at Zion and Highway 3, or if signalization is required. We've pushed back a little bit on this because it is really 6 lots on a rural road going to Highway 3, but nonetheless, we've been asked to complete the study, and that's well underway, and we hope to have it to the township in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So in terms of our next step, this is our statutory public meeting where we're looking forward to the comments from council and members of the public this evening to inform any changes that we may need to make to the plan. And also we'll be addressing those public and agency review comments once the rest of them come in and we've had an opportunity to follow up on the environmental impact study matters. We'll update and modify the application as required and make a resubmission to town staff prior to consideration of the applications by council at a future meeting. Pending the approval of those applications, it would then move into the detailed engineering process where we'd be able to address all of the grading, drainage, and stormwater requirements that were asked for by some of those reviewing agencies. So with that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have or provide any responses to public comments that come up this evening.
Do members of council have any questions or comments regarding the proposed application? Councilor McCullough?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of questions, couple of comments. First question is going to be, have you done bird, bat, turtle studies? We know there's nothing there. We're not going to run into problems on this. There's no Blanding's turtles. There's no whippoorwills. There's none of these bobolinks that are going to come back and bite us. I've been through enough of them, so I'm asking you the question.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, we've had our environmental impact study was scoped by the Niagara Region and the MPCA. I can't remember offhand all the specific species that have been found through that assessment, but forming part of the comments from the region, the MPCA, and the township as well. If there's any species that require additional protection, they would have been identified in that study, and the necessary conditions or changes to the plan would be required to protect them for the long term.
Okay. through you, Mr. Mayor, the one other comment I have, so you have these long skinny lots, basically cigarette lots is what the term is. What tends to happen is I don't believe the setback from the road to the houses is far enough, and the back half just becomes a junkyard. You know, like you, as far as I'm concerned, the front yard should probably be 300 feet to the front door, so that you keep the whole lot tidy instead of keeping a little front yard and the rest of it grows into a disaster area that the neighbors have to look at. So that would just be my one comment to planning, maybe to take a look at that. And I know they're 700 feet deep. People get lazy and they don't take care of it, right? Especially new guys that come to the city and just get tired of, they'd rather go golfing than cut grass, so.
Through Mr. Chair, I think I can just kind of qualify that. So the delineation that's shown on there of the location of the houses was just shown to demonstrate the minimum 15-meter setback that's in the zoning bylaw. What we were trying to demonstrate on this plan with a bit of detail is that there is sufficient room for a dwelling, the necessary septic field, and then a backup system area if it should be required. So the residents, provided that they met all the necessary zoning setbacks, could locate those dwellings anywhere on the property within the permitted envelope. So this plan isn't meant to say that they're all going to be up there along the road. That's just to demonstrate that would be the minimum distance they could be from Zion Road.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? No? Are there any comments or input from the gallery? No? Okay. Okay, I'll move to the planner for the next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So next steps, a planning report regarding a complete review of the applications will be brought forward by staff and considered at a later date. As Mr. Rowe indicated, there are still some final revisions to the environmental impact study, and then obviously those agency comments that are outstanding. So a date has not been selected as of yet, but it will be on a future council agenda once all of that has been completed. I just have two clauses regards to appeal rights. So if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submission to the township regarding the proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment before the township gives or refuses to give approval to the applications, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the township to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting and or make written submissions to the township regarding the proposed applications before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the applications, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the tribunal unless it is in the opinion of the tribunal that there are reasonable grounds to do so.
Thank you. That concludes the public meeting for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If you wish to be notified of the decision of council regarding the proposed application, you must make a written request to the deputy clerk of the township. All right, we have Stephen Sues here who would like to make a delegation respecting mental health, homelessness, and addiction. He seems to have left the room. Oh, I did ask that. Of course, Andrew. Yes. Yep.
Switch it off. Thank you. I'm really
Mr.
looking
Watts,
for a little bit of confidence.
Can you first? You have to just state your name and your
I
address.
do apologise. Well, it's a long time since I've been here.
That's all right.
Andrew Watts, 10810 Rathfon Road, Wainfleet. My main concern is where we're going with development in Wainfleet. I get the impression that nobody understands that as far as provincial, now, in spite of Bill 23, both the province and the region in their new official plan, which goes to 2051, recognise Wainfleet as only a rural municipality, the only one in Niagara. We have no urban areas. We are purely rural. And yet, since the past council came in, we seem to have been approving what can only be described as urban sprawl, right, left and centre. Wainfleet also is the only municipality in Niagara region that has no intensification target. It's zero. They have no mandate to introduce an intensification target. We're not obliged to, we're not mandated to, not by anybody. And additionally to that, we don't have anywhere to do any urban expansion in because we are rural. But somehow, over the past few months or years or whatever, there has been a rural expansion. Makes perfect sense. It's called housekeeping, and it was expanding the boundaries of the existing hamlets, I think, to something like 75 hectares, something like that. That's all well and good, except I find it very coincidentally intriguing, although the mapping is pretty bad in the provincial document that I was looking at. It looks to me as though not only is the Marshall Heritage Estate now included in that boundary, it wasn't before. The second condo proposed for Wainfleet Village is also now within that boundary, and I'm pretty sure that this present subdivision is also within that boundary now, and it wasn't before. I actually think that the diagram for this little subdivision looks pretty good. What concerns me more, though, is the fact that the long document attached to the agenda for this evening's meeting refers to the Condominium Act and the plan of condominium. Now that, again, has some concerns for me because the first condominium that we were lucky enough to get was Lakewood, which this past council approved finally, saying all 61 conditions have been met. That's great, except if I recall it clearly, when the public meeting was held place, the township planner at the time and a consultant planner recommended they approved it. They did by a vote of 3-2, which is hardly conclusive, and I guess I'm not required here.
Sorry, Andrew, you're just referring to the condominium portion of the meeting, which right now we're just discussing the Zion Road application.
Yes,
So
that's correct, and it's referred to as a condominium agreement.
We were just talking about the proposed subdivision at Zion Road, not the condominium.
No. The Zion Road is referred to as part of a condominium agreement. There's a whole document in the agenda minutes. I read it twice.
No, that's a separate item.
In that case, I'm getting some very weird notes on my agenda minutes then. It is Zion Road. It refers to it. It's that same diagram I've just been looking at.
Can I ask the planner to just bring that up for us and give some comment on that?
Yep, certainly, Mr. Mayor. So the public meeting deals with the proposed plan of subdivision at Zion Road. My planning staff report that's later in the agenda deals with a plan of condominium application that council draft approved in July of 2021, and that's off of Wills Road. So it's not the same development. That planning report that's later in the agenda is for a different development application.
So there is, I do apologise. But my whole point behind that was that a condominium agreement for this other one, which is not part of the public meeting, is based on the Lakewood condominium agreement, which was a really good one according to the planning report. Now, a week after Wainfleet Council approved the Lakewood condominium with its 61 conditions,
And I'm sorry,
we-
Andrew, but you have to stay on topic. You have to stay with Zion Road. We're not discussing the Lakewood project or this other condominium project at this time. We're just discussing the Zion Road subdivision.
I thought public meetings were so the public could give input on a subject which is developments in Wainfleet as well as anything else.
It is the subject that we are discussing, not other subjects that are off topic.
Okay, well, how come we seem to be doing more and more subdivisions, having them approved, such as this one? I think the actual diagram looks pretty attractive, but it's a subdivision. We're a rural community. We have 0 intensification target.
I apologize, Andrew. I have to thank you for your comments, but we're going to have to move on.
Pardon?
I said I apologize, Andrew, but we are going to have to move on because we're going off topic and we have to continue with the meeting. Thank you. Okay, we're going to get back on schedule right here. We have Stephen Sues here to make a delegation respecting mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Mr. Sues, please come up to the podium, and you will have 10 minutes to make your presentation.
We don't need a mic, but thank you. For 2 years, I haven't stepped in the council chamber. And holy man, does it ever feel good. What do I say? What do I say? You know, I'm thinking about February 14th in the region. I'm thinking about how the region, for 4 years, ignored a state of emergency on mental health, homelessness, and addiction. The facts were thrown in their face. If this was a court case, they would have ruled in my favor. 11 out of 12 of Niagara's municipalities, unanimous. That means everybody voted for it. Let me get a little more comfortable. I feel comfortable in a council chamber right now. Hi, everyone. So I decided to wear a Métis sash tonight because Paul Grenier gave it to me, and he's a total G. He was on the region. You know, it's a sign of struggle, but ultimately triumph. I got so much on my mind right now. I wanted to, when one of you counselors stood up, and I wanted to pounce when he talked about the hospital system. Because let me tell you about our hospital system, Wallen Hospital. I have a friend, his name's Spencer Barton. I have his permission to speak. He sent an open letter to Niagara Region on February 14th. This man suffers from epilepsy, okay? He's mentally ill. I'm mentally ill. I was an addict of cocaine and meth. Turned my life around, quit that shit. So Spencer, he goes to the hospital, and what does the staff do? They try to make him sign himself out right after he wakes up because they just don't want to deal with him. They let this man walk home in a hospital gown and didn't even call a code yellow. I will not read about one more of my friends in the obituary section for preventable deaths.
Sorry, Mr. Sues, you cannot get aggressive.
I'm sorry. I'm getting passionate.
Okay? That is, continue and you will be cut off. I'm so sorry. Thank you.
That's the thing here. You know, and tonight we have a wonderful motion in front of us that I was happy to work with Wainfleet Town Council on. You know, and I talk about lighting the match, right? I talk about, you know, this movement that has been born. And, you know, like, it was you guys that did the voting. You guys unanimously supported it, you know, and the region just said, oh, you know, we're not going to implement it. I mean, the math on that just doesn't make sense, right? You have probably, if I had to guess, about 110 politicians supporting this, 3 out of 4 of the MPPs. And then it took 2/3 of Niagara Regional Council to kill the motion. Okay. So after we're done passing the state of emergency, we're going to have a conversation about governance, I guess, too, eh? So, there's been a lot of rhetoric from the chair's office, unfortunately, on this issue. States of emergency are designed for short-term ice storms. The COVID emergency lasted, 2 years? This is the best one. It's symbolic. No money's attached. I mean, do they have Sam Osterhoff's party and government on the public record in the St. Catherine Standard stating once the region declares the emergency, the province will work together with them? I mean, how much more evidence do they need? And so I had to think, okay, what can I do? So, I did the old Steve Seuss way, and I sat down and wrote a motion because that's what I do. And, tonight we're going to dive into it. So I just compel I'm done talking. I'm sorry I lost my cool a little bit, but people need to lose their cool on these issues, because when you've been ignored on a state of emergency for 4 years, okay, and people around you are dying, and I almost died in the street, I'm allowed to get mad about that. So, respectfully, I'm going to ask one of the counselors if they could read the motion, because I want to work with you guys. This is an incredible motion. The people behind this, who supported this, and the staff is just amazing. I mean, I chose Wainfleet because, small and mighty, right? So, not a municipality with not a lot of resources, not a lot of, but a lot of heart. And if you think that farmers don't struggle from this, people in the church don't struggle for this, and it's just more taboo to speak up, that the business owner every day who's getting through their day taking opiates, I mean, with drug addiction, first it becomes your friend, then it becomes your lover, and ultimately it becomes your slave master. But my good friend Dr. Liam Carey said, recovery is possible in these issues. So, where the federal government is offering assisted suicide for the mentally ill, this motion tonight and the subsequent regional motion is going to offer people hope. And I don't want to start counting a death rate. I want to start counting a survival rate. Because you know what? The shelter in the city of Welland opened, and guess what? On the night of that polar vortex, 2 people stayed in that shelter. They could have froze outside. And what did the region offer? Oh, assertive street outreach will come bring you a blanket. You're still going to freeze. I can go on and on. I've made my case clear in the press. I've made my case clear in video media, and social media. I'm making my case clear here tonight. So I thank you for your time, and really appreciate the chance, Mayor Grant, to speak. And thank you for working with me. You called me up and you said, how can I help with mental health, homelessness, and addiction? Same with Councillor Van Vliet. I remember these things, so I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seuss, for your presentation. I would note that on December 15th, 2020, Council passed the following motion: that the request from Stephen Seuss respecting a request that Niagara Regional Council declare a state of emergency on mental health, homelessness, and addiction be supported. Council has previously supported this initiative, and that the motion of support still stands today. Are there any comments or questions for our delegation from members of Council? No? Okay, seeing none. Any further discussion from members of Council? Okay, I understand that you will be making a presentation to the Niagara Region Social Service and Public Health Committee on February 14th, 2023 to speak to this matter, and that you are anticipating a positive outcome from the regional committee. In light of Council's standing support and your pending presentation to Niagara Region, perhaps it would be appropriate for Council to receive this presentation for information at this time. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor McCullen, Councillor Van Vliet. Any discussion? Okay, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried. Thank you again, Mr. Suze, and best of luck on February 14th.
So just for clarification, you passed that motion, right?
We did not pass the motion. We received the motion for information and just stated that we were in support as of December 15th, 2020, and we still remain in support of that.
Oh, okay. Will you be moving the local motion that was presented on the correspondence on the agenda?
Can I refer? Okay. Depending on what happens at the regional committee, we will come back to that once you're done your meeting there. Okay? Perfect. Councillor Wainfleet?
If it's okay with the rest of my colleagues, I was wondering if we could flip the agenda to move the planning staff report, I'm sorry, what do you want to do? Just move the budget to the bottom because everybody's here, and the planning staff people can, and that people in the gallery who want to leave can leave. Is everybody good with that?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
All right, then we're going to move to, now you need to help me, to building. I'll come back over here. All right. Okay, so now that we're going to go into the building staff reports, Mr. Hopkins, would you like to give a brief overview of your report? Now we need all these.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you and to all of council. Tonight I'd like to just give a general summary of the building activity that has happened within the Township of Wainfleet over the last year. In all, the department issued 149 building permits. Approximately 5 still remain in the queue, just waiting for payment. Those totals get us closer to the 10-year average of 156 permits per year. Staff issued 17 single detached dwelling permits this year, which is just 2 below the 10-year average of 19. Out of the 17 new homes, 6 were built on existing lots in coordination with demolition permits. Not noted in the report were 3 permits that were issued for secondary suites. While these aren't added to the total number of new dwellings, it is noteworthy as it is addressing the need for housing for some of our residents. I expect this number to increase over the next year based on the permits we've issued so far this year, in addition to the conversations we've already had with some residents. Over the last year, agricultural permits have increased from 12 issued last year, 2 years ago rather, to 18 issued last year. Probably the most notable figure in Table 1 of Appendix A is the total cost of construction value, which is more than double any previous year in the Township of Wainfleet. This is a result of the construction of the new school next door. But considering that, even if we take the $22.6 million cost of construction estimated for the school, we still remain $5 million more than any previous year in the township. Circling back to the executive summary of this report, I mentioned a department initiative to put a focus on addressing long-standing open permits. Staff were able to finalize 94 permits that were dated 2020 or older. The highlight of this initiative was our ability to return approximately $25,000 back to applicants and residents who in some cases forgot they ever paid the deposits. This remains a task, an initiative that we continue again through this year, and we are continued and we're hoping for similar success. Again, looking ahead to this year, we do recommend as a department that residents wishing to apply for building permits do so as soon as possible, or at least have the conversation with staff over the next few months to ensure that once nicer weather is here, that they can begin without delay. Lastly, this actually today marks my 1-year anniversary with the township. I consider myself extremely lucky to hold this position. Over that year, while they're not here, I wanted to highlight building staff, Joe Schoonings and Jesse Leckwitz. Close, maybe. Sorry, soon to be Crawford. They are both dedicated to their department, their fellow staff, and most importantly to the taxpayers. And I just wanted to highlight their involvement and dedication over the last year. And other than that, that covers my summary tonight of the building activity, and thank you for the opportunity to do so.
I have a motion that the building staff report BSR 001/2023 respecting the summary of 2022 building activity within the Township of Wainfleet be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McCullen, Councilor Gilmore. Any discussion? Councilor Gilmore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to comment further on your comment about being lucky, I would feel that we're more of the lucky people than you. And as I've conveyed to you privately, I hear nothing but positive about the department now. And that's contrary to comments that have been received over my previous 8 years sitting here. So I think we're very fortunate, and the department's doing a great job.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, that credit is completely due and is for our department as well as all of the departments that work extremely well together internally here. It's a feature. It's a part of it that doesn't exist in a lot of municipalities. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor McCullen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to reiterate what Councilor Gilmore said. My phone stopped ringing. I don't have anybody calling me about building problems, so thank you very much. It's done. I haven't had any. So again, thank you very much. You and your staff are doing a great job.
No other comments or questions? Okay, then I'll just call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that'll be carried. Mr. Kolasa, would you like to give a brief overview of your, we're moving on to community and development services. Mr. Kolasa, would you like to give a brief overview of your memorandum?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. Again, speaking on behalf of the Manager of Community and Development Services, who is proposing some minor housekeeping updates to the Township's land disposal policy. As members will recall, the Ontario Municipal Act requires councils to adopt a variety of policies respecting a variety of different matters. One such policy required by law that each municipality have in place is a policy pertaining to the disposal of real property or the disposal of land. Here in Wainfleet, council, first policy was adopted back around 2010. It was subsequently updated in 2015, and at this time, after a sort of ongoing review of the 2015 policy, there are a number of housekeeping changes being made or being proposed to council in order to improve the transparency of the land disposal process, to clearly identify expectations for both the public, applicants who are making or seeking to acquire land from the township, and clarify the role of the township itself. And finally, to provide some flexibility to the township in dealing with applications that come before it, particularly in light of the sort of evolving real estate marketplace that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. So again, at this time, we'll try to respond to any questions you might have. But the key thing is we're proposing some housekeeping changes to make things work better and more transparently.
Okay, I have a motion that council adopt the revised land disposal policy as presented, and that a bylaw to repeal bylaw number 033-2015 land disposal policy be presented for consideration. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Fleet, Councillor McCullen. Any discussion? Councillor McCullen.
Do you have it? Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Kolasa. Oh, I have a couple of questions on this. The railroad part, that should be appraisal. If we're doing appraisals, they should absolutely be appraised as well. The other question would be if And this will be a reason why. So if a person buys it happens to be along the low road frontage part of it, if he buys, his neighbor turns it down, he buys the whole thing, it's 90 feet of frontage. We need 170 feet of frontage to make a lot. Now, if he has enough land on the side of his place, so he's gonna buy it for $1 and he's gonna sell it for $300,000, because it gets to create, not right away, but he can come back and ask for a severance and get a house lot. We're not getting good value for our property, so that is why I'm suggesting we do that and get full appraisal on it, and then we know, okay, listen, you look at it, the guy can do it, or the woman can do it, we then get a fair market value for the land, rather than giving it away for $1.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. With respect to the appraisal, by all means, that is certainly something council can direct at any time. Again, policy contemplates getting evaluations done, and we can certainly make sure that it says so. With respect to the idea of selling it for $1, having it flipped and then modified and then become a building lot, again, as I mentioned in sort of the preamble, there are provisions in the policy being proposed before you now to be able to consider those types of eventualities, and council can make a decision that would be in the best interests of the public with respect to the selling price of land. Previously, the old policy provided that the land would be sold at the appraised price or at a specific price. Under the new revised policy, council actually has more flexibility to establish what the selling price on the piece of land will be without being tied directly to an appraisal or a dollar figure that you've sort of indicated there. So you will have a case-by-case ability to deal with that, which you did not have previously.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Anderson.
Through you, Mayor Grant, I'm just wondering, Will, if we could have some clarification on behalf of a resident who contacted me. And is the old standing scenario of road allowances from Lakeshore to Lake Erie still remain in a not to be sold position?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, and I will turn to Sarah for clarification, but my recollection is that there are policies contained within the current official plan of the township indicating that wherever possible, the township will attempt to protect and retain possession of those types of road allowances. So we do have policies in place under the Planning Act, under other legislation, which intends to protect those types of road allowances.
Through you, Mayor, just to clarify, so in fact, residences that employ transiting down the road allowance to get to their beachfront properties for road work and beach protection, and also any resident who wishes to walk down a road allowance, if it's accessible, can walk down any road allowance, use the beach, and we're going to keep that scenario perpetuity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. That is what the official plan provides for. Again, council, notwithstanding anything that's written, members of the public oftentimes come to council and ask you about certain circumstances or certain situations. And again, each of those is dealt with on a case-by-case basis based on the facts of the situation. The policies direct in the official plan that those lakefront access routes to the beach are to be protected wherever possible. I'm not sure I can go further than that without a very specific section by section look at a specific road, look at a specific situation.
No, thank you, Will. Through you, Mayor. Thank you. I'm not looking for absolute case-by-case granular. I just want to sort of have it reiterated that those road allowances are somewhat protected. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? No. Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We're going to move on to the fire staff reports. Chief Alcock, would you like to give us a brief overview of your report?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The first report I have before you is the fourth quarter for 2022. As always, it covers off the fire department operations and events that have occurred during October, November, and December of 2022.
All right, I have a motion that the fire staff report FSR 001-2023 respecting the 2022 fourth quarter fire and emergency services review be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor McCullen? Councilor Anderson? Any discussion? All right, no discussion, so I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we're moving on to the 2022 multi-hazard weather event presentation. Chief Alcock, would you like to make your presentation to council respecting the 2022 multi-hazard weather event?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So this is a review of the Christmas blizzard of 2022 from a municipal and emergency management perspective. As we all just lived that just a month and a half ago, it's always good to do a quick debrief and review of the operations of the municipality during those events. Just a quick background, while blizzard was one aspect, as we're all aware, we remember that there was 3 different warnings that were issued during that event, which included the windstorm, which also caused the subsequent seiche and flooding event, which was then followed by a flash freeze and then the blizzard. So as opposed to normal weather, wind, storm, seiche events that we've had in the past, where, you know, the floodwaters rise and then lower, in this case we had freezing and snow and zero visibility and high winds for sustained periods. So it was much more complex than just a standard windstorm that we've seen in the last 4 years. This is just a quick review of the timeline, you know, just starting back from December 21st, you know, some of the events that occurred through, you know, Environment Canada issuing weather statements and watches, and then the eventual warnings that came out on the 22nd and 23rd. If you recall, it was Christmas Eve. That is when the bulk of the blizzard was at its worst. You know, there was incidents all across southern Niagara, and the 3 municipalities of Fort Erie, Port Colborne, and Wainfleet were the most heavily impacted, with those to the north more or less getting just a regular Canadian winter storm. Christmas Day is when we saw the storm break, and that's when we were able to begin our recovery process and digging out, which we relied on our mutual aid partners from a public works perspective. And as we were doing the dig out, we were dealing with drainage and the flash freeze issue. That's when we also found out that we were expecting a rainstorm and a significant warm up, which also spawned a secondary flooding event for the 26th through to the 30th. Just some of the items that we experienced. There was sustained. The highest wind gust was officially recorded at 125 kilometers in Port Colborne, but there's an unofficial report from the Peace Bridge of 150. However, we did have sustained winds between 80 to 110 in excess of 24 to 36 hours, which is probably one of the longest windstorm events that we've experienced in recent history. From a municipal perspective, our emergency management team was in contact with the regional emergency management as well as the CEMCs from both Fort Erie and Port Colborne during the entire event, just to make sure that we were all experiencing similar situations and what our planning, what our resources, and what our impacts were. So on the 21st, as you can see, even at 2100, 9 o'clock at night, we were receiving communications from the region, an updated forecast on what to expect. And that continued through the 22nd, in which our own municipal emergency control group met at noon on the 22nd. Kind of at that point, we thought, just another windstorm snowstorm, maybe we close the facility early on Christmas Eve and move from there. Later that evening is when we kind of realized that this was, the forecast was actually a little more firm than what we had expected. Early on the 23rd, the fire department actually had responded to an equipment fire inside a structure, and it was during that time, it was 6 degrees, raining, and by the time we packed up from that fire by about 8 o'clock, it had transitioned, the weather had dropped, the winds had picked up, and it had started to snow. By 9:30 that morning, the Public Works Operations Department declared a significant weather event, which Richard does regularly when there's significant snowfalls that can impede or impact municipal roads operations. We had a regional emergency management meeting at 10 o'clock that morning just to kind of see what the situation of the various municipalities, and that's when we quickly found out that those of us in the south were experiencing something much different than those in the north. Our control group met again on noon, and that's when we had determined that the flooding had already started, and that we were going to be issuing emergency information to both 610 radio and the 211 to distribute to the public for broadcast. It was at that time that the MPCA then issued an update to the flood warning. Later that afternoon, I guess it was 4 o'clock that afternoon, as a standard, Public Works, their visibility was poor. It was getting dark, so Public Works roads crews had removed from the roads. And by 9 o'clock that night, when visibility was at near zero, it was reported to me that the MTO, when I was speaking to one of their operators, the MTO had pulled their drivers off the road at 9 o'clock that night. And I'm sure we have stories from across the municipality of drivers that were stranded since that time. Beginning on Christmas Eve on the 24th, the fire department responded to a multitude of events. Not uncommon to windstorms, but what we found this time, whether it be a gas line that's been uprooted with a tree or a tree that's come across a hydro line, normally we have Enbridge and Hydro One that responds and restores those services. But because of the blizzard in this case, those utilities were not responding. So in this case, it was a decision, to mitigate, make the situation as safe as possible, and then move on to the next incident. It was at that point, by 7 in the morning, the southern municipalities began the discussions of declaring a state of emergency and putting forward a request to the province for an emergency alert broadcast, as there was several stranded vehicles and abandoned drivers that was already starting to occur in Fort Erie, and we were starting to see that happen in Wainfleet later that morning. By 8 in the morning, operations staff had tried to get their staff in to begin road works, and it was hampered by the fact that even the roads works crews couldn't even get to the Public Works building. So, the initial operations was that once we had someone at Public Works, they would plow to the next staff member, pick them up, bring them to the Public Works building, and so on. So that's how we could get our staffing in. In both of these days, on the 23rd and 24th, the fire department had staffed our stations. The idea there is instead of having firefighters respond back and forth on the roads, once the first call comes in that morning, they stay at the station until they're able to go home safely that evening, so that way we're avoiding unnecessary travel. And that occurred both days. By 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning is when we started to see an uptick in our calls. Public Works moved to an emergency operations only, where they pulled their trucks back to Public Works. Once we declared our state of emergency, and that was pushed to the Provincial Emergency Operations Center, when the fire department received a call for service, it would be paired with a Public Works piece of equipment, whether it be a plow or a grader, and we would do a joint response with the plow running out ahead of us, which turned out not the greatest, as we found with many abandoned vehicles and roadways blocked. In one case, we actually had our own grader stuck and another plow stuck, which in fact trapped our fire truck. So we had crews that were trapped out for a little while until they were able to get themselves dug out and get turned around to get back to the hall. So you'll see there in some of the responses, instead of doing a two-station or multi-truck response, we were sending only one resource to a call. And then by about 1 in the afternoon, I had made the call that we were responding. We suspended our level of service, and we were responding to life-threatening incidents only. So just if it was a medical assist, if If it was a VSA, CPR in progress, we would do our best to get there, but with the understanding that, it was a life and limb type incident, and the minor non-life threatening calls the fire department was not coming to. In the subsequent debrief that we conducted with 40 and Port Colborne, we were the only municipality to do that. And looking back, the other chiefs had wished that they had done the same, as they had several crews trapped in trucks for upwards of 10 hours. We did not experience that situation. As you can see, that storm continued, and our last circulation, I guess in that afternoon when we met with the Emergency Operations Center, we were also talking with Red Cross and Emergency Social Services for the opening of a warming center. While we had known that the power was out from the 22nd and the 23rd, it was decided that it was just far too dangerous, one, to get staff in to open the warming center, but also it was too dangerous to ask for public to travel the roads to even get to the warming center. So that's why, it's immensely, important that, our citizens have 72-hour kits, so that way they can weather the storms, and then, once the storm, subsides and the roads are passable, that's when you can get out to shelter and to resources. So we had set up a plan, and we had Emergency Social Services with Red Cross and the regional community emergency response team. They were going to provide staffing, so that way we could get the warming shelter open on Christmas morning. Which by 9 o'clock that morning, we were digging out, and by 11 o'clock we had that warming shelter open. The regional CERT team and Red Cross, they brought food and drinks and staples and cots and whatever was needed if we needed an overnight stay. And then at that point, also that morning, St. Catharines and Niagara Region sent us some plow resources to assist with opening up our roads. And then fire staff began our door-to-door along the lakeshore area, letting people know that the warming center was open and doing wellness checks on various people that were impacted. Which actually proved to be fruitful because the power had been out for so long. Most people's cell phones and radios and batteries had all died, so they had no way of even knowing that we had a warming center open. Our legacy media via radio or social media, they had no devices to even know. So that door-to-door proved fruitful. But what we found was that many people were sheltering in place. They were looking after each other and as a community looking after one another. Which is on the 26th of December, we ended up closing our warming center. During the period of both Christmas Day and Boxing Day, we received no citizens who required the warming shelter. So that just goes to show how resilient our community is. On the 27th is when we began doing official continual assessments. Hydro 1 had moved in with their, I'm going to use the word convoy, to begin the dig out. Along Beach Road East, which you'll see some pictures here in a bit. And it was that afternoon that we then terminated our emergency once we began to get our roads reopened and we were kind of back to normal. Some of the key highlights that I want to, as I've already said, it's very evident that our residents, we did have some residents who, saw the storm coming. They knew that this was going to be a bad one. They evacuated before the storm even started, and they called the community paramedic and the fire service and just said, if my life alert goes off, I'm not at home, I'm at a hotel in Welland. So, it was nice to see that level of pre-planning and communication by our citizens. We had a self-organized group of citizens, who took to assisting people in need. Our warming center was offered but not used. As I already said, many community members, they took in neighbors and they looked after each other. I would say that, because of that resiliency, it placed much less strain on the municipal services. It's also, you can definitely see where, the permanent residents, who've been through these storm events, they're much more resilient than maybe some of our newer residents that, country living, it may be a bit foreign to them, so they're learning the ways of rural lifestyle. As I already said, it's so important. It highlights the need for a 72-hour emergency preparedness kit and the ability to, self-shelter and weather those storms. And I will say from a municipal and regional partnership, whether it be fire department, regional operations, public works, we all came together. Those agreements, the equipment, staffing, whatever was needed, it was there. As soon as the wind stopped and the snow died down, we had what we needed to get reopened. And then the next couple of slides is just some pictures of what we were experiencing. This is some flooding down along Lake Shore. You can already see the winds and some of the rubble blowing in. This was on the 24th. We had a tree that uprooted a gas line. We actually have one of our firefighters who's a gas tech, so he climbed down in the hole and pinched it off with a pair of vice grips to stop the flow of gas. You can kind of see we had, we had one of our firefighters on a snowmobile and another one on a four-wheeler. They actually went out at night. We had 2 regional employees that were stranded on Station Road. So they went out and they were able to get those guys off the trucks and back to safety to their supervisors. As you can see, we issued the emergency alert. That was done. That process was took a little longer than we had hoped, but in the end, it did get out. As what we were experiencing along the south was much different than what was happening in northern Niagara and even other parts of the province. And what we found is, many of these drivers of abandoned vehicles and that were stuck in the ditches and drifts. Many of them were from out of town. Some of them come from Guelph, Mississauga. They thought they'd come and spend Christmas at their cottage, and then they hit Chambers Corners and didn't make it past the village. So having that level of. That's why we needed this alert to go out, so that way the community really understood that this was serious, and that if you didn't need to be on the roads, you shouldn't be. As you can see during the dig out, with some of the abandoned vehicles we had, it hampered some of our road clearing. I will say by the end of the day on Christmas Day, when we had done a patrol, pretty much all of those vehicles have been removed, so we didn't have to tow any vehicles like you may have seen in other municipalities or the MTO did along the QEW. So that was nice to see that by the end of the day everybody had retrieved their vehicles and we were back to operating. Some of our partners, our warming center with our CERT team members. This is some of the again, as we always see. I think I've shared this types of photos in other events, but. When the winds start and the waves, that blows the water against the buildings, and then it freezes and it continues and continues. In this case, you're looking at ice that's anywhere between 4 to 6 inches on these structures, and that also built on hydro lines. And in the flooded low-lying areas, that all froze. And you'll see in the next photo here, you can kind of see all of those hydro lines. Many of them were dragged down by the weight of the ice and were actually under the water. So when you walked along the ice here, you were actually walking over the hydro lines. It was a little weird at first until you realized just what was happening. Hydro 1 arriving, and it was at that point the Public Works began a joint clear. Public Works would go in, they would scrape the roads clear, break the ice out, clear it up. Hydro 1 will move in, make the line safe, remove lines, reconnect houses that could be reconnected. They'd pull their equipment out, and Public Works would do the next section of road. And that's how they worked through to get Beach Road East, Bellevue, and Hill back open. This is just some of the road reopenings. On December 27th, as part of our damage assessment, I met with members from NRP and their drone team, and we were doing aerial footage for damage assessments. And we also wanted to see how far out the ice pack was and how far inland the flooding went. We sent that footage off to the MPCA to assist with their flooding assessment for the warm up that was coming. So we had an idea of just how bad the flooding may be, and you'll see there. There's a bit of flooding that was occurring right along Highway 3 near Quick Mix, where we had one of the drainage, the culvert was plugged with ice, and it was close. Luckily, the quarry, I think, shut the pump off, and the MTO was able to get the culvert open, and by the next day, those floodwaters were gone. And lastly, we received a wonderful certificate from our emergency management partners at the province for our commitment to emergency management and our contributions during the weather event. So if there's any questions, I'll take them now.
Any questions or comments from council?
Well, Mr. Mayor, through you, I would like to extend thanks and appreciation to members of the emergency control group who did work through the holidays to sort of manage the emergency. To you, Mr. Mayor, you had just taken office basically a month prior, and we looked to you for your support and assistance as we were conducting emergency control group meetings and so on. And I know that there's a whole bunch of training that we members of the emergency control group are required to take. And you didn't have it at the time. You're definitely working your way through that stuff now. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to extend thanks to the first responders, including fire, including all the operations staff who were out there, utility companies, police, EMS, for helping Wainfleet get through this. As well, volunteers and citizens. As Morgan said, Wainfleet is a very resilient community, and the members of the public that were able to get together, take care of themselves and their neighbors, that was instrumental in making it through the emergency as quickly and as safely as everyone did. And then finally, also, again, our municipal colleagues across the region, especially St. Catharines and Niagara Region itself, the two perhaps largest groups who were actually sending us down equipment to help us out with trying to clear out on Christmas Day. So again, thanks to everyone who did what they did to get us through it.
Councilor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to you, Chief. Do you think there's any benefit in establishing a registry of potential snowmobile operators that you could call on? It's okay to get the odd one, but you wouldn't want a helter-skelter response. But if you had a group of people that you vetted that would be available, I know that happened in other municipalities, and I definitely know it happened in the blizzard of '77, but it wasn't coordinated by the fire chief, but just a local guy, because I helped him out when I was a kid. But I just wonder if it would be a benefit to establish that on the off chance that we go through this again.
Certainly, I know in speaking with the chiefs from both Port Colborne and Fort Erie, they put a request out for citizens with snowmobiles. When you're using volunteers like that, the municipality pretty much has to declare an emergency. At that point, we're able to then have the volunteers covered from a liability and workplace perspective. We can certainly look into that. I will say, in speaking with those, you're right in the fact that from a communications, from a training, tracking of these people, I can tell you even just trying to maintain 60 volunteer firefighters at any given time is difficult. I will say we do have tracks on our UTV. It was accessible and ready to be used, and it was never called for service. And that was the case, I think in Port Colborne, they might have used a couple of snowmobilers once or twice. And if they probably would have used our tracked vehicle if we had gotten it to them. So, I mean, that's why we have the resource. It's there, and we never even got a chance to use it.
Councilor McCollum.
You, Mr. Mayor, just on that same line of thought, you mentioned where some people called in and said they left and don't worry about us, we're not there. Is that something that you might want to put a notice to all of the residents of Lakeshore? And listen, if you're gone, call the town so we know we're not going door to door looking for people in a situation like this. Or if their house smoke alarm goes off or their burglar alarm goes off, we're not going risking our guys to go look at something where it's the weight of the ice that pushed in the door, right?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, as you know, down along the Lakeshore, it's largely seasonal property. So yeah, that's. I guess the onus it's the onus of the individual, the property owner, to communicate that, and that's, in this case, we had that, which was great, and we're always open to that kind of communication. I don't know if it's really beneficial for us to be, we could certainly get messaging out, but I think at least from my experience being down there, from a boots on the ground, door to door, the community members knew who was home and who wasn't and where each other were.
Wainfleet.
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to thank you, Chief, and all of your people for being out there and for personally checking in on me, making sure I'm okay, because I'm anxious about stuff like this. And if there's anything we could say to the residents is be prepared, because these storms are not 100-year storms anymore. They're all the time storms. If you live out here, it's windy every day. Even like at 50 kilometers an hour, we're like, oh, okay, cool. We don't care. But And I would also like suggest anybody get a generator, and when it's snowing like that, dig the snow out around it. And a couple of these pictures are right down the road for me. This was a welcome to the lake storm for me, just saying. But thank you so much.
Chief, for you, in regards to the warming center, because of the event that happened and how secluded the lakeshore area was, would you look at the idea of possibly opening warming centers near the lakeshore area, specifically one on each side of the Casey Drain? Because obviously we all know that the Casey Drain divides the lakeshore residents. Nobody to the west of the Casey Drain in an event like that will be able to, go to a warming center on the east side and vice versa. So is that something that in the future we might look at?
Absolutely. I know that I've been approached by the Lions Club to possibly look at their building. I will say when looking at warming centers, reception centers, shelters, there are standards that are set out under the Emergency Management and Civil Protections Act, that require that shelters meet standards, whether it be through AODA, backup generators, potable water, sufficient washroom. So any of those facilities that we would look at and include in our critical infrastructure list, they would have to meet those. And those are assessments that are done through emergency social services. They come in with Red Cross, they do a building or a facility assessment, and then they would determine what the capabilities of those buildings are. But certainly if we have those facilities available, it's just a matter of, calling out and then having those assessments completed.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, there are no further discussion. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Van Fleet and Councillor McCullen. There's no other discussion. So I will call the question. All in favor? All opposed? So that'll be carried. Okay, we're going to move on to PSR 001-2023, the condominium agreement and final approval of draft plan of condominium P01-2021W, Daniel and Candace Buns. Ms. Ivins, would you please give us a brief overview of your report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to all of council. The previous term of council draft approved the plan of condominium application for the subject lands on July 13th of 2021, which proposes to create 6 units for single detached dwellings on a private road off of Wills Road. So that draft approval was subject to 43 conditions, and the applicant has been working to fulfill these conditions over the past year and a half. Staff are satisfied that these 43 conditions have been or will be fulfilled. A chart listing those conditions along with staff comments is attached as Appendix A to the report, and the draft condominium agreement is attached as Appendix B. I've also prepared a bylaw to add the name of the private road to Schedule A of Bylaw 42 of 2010, being our municipal and private road name bylaw. That amending bylaw is attached as Appendix C and is on the agenda for consideration this evening.
I have a motion that the planning staff report PSR 001-2023 be received and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the draft condominium agreement with Buns Properties and Management Limited attached as Appendix B, subject to any revisions deemed necessary by staff, and that the bylaw attached as Appendix C be adopted by council to amend Bylaw 042-2010 to add Buns Lane to the consolidated list of street names, and that the staff be authorized to grant final approval upon execution of the condominium agreement. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Van Fleet, Councillor McCullen. Any discussion? No? Okay, then I'll just call the question. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, at this time, we're just going to take a 5-minute recess. After that nice little recess. Yeah. Sorry about the gavel. Okay. We're going to move on to staff reports. We're moving on to the 2023 budget. I would like to invite our treasurer, Ms. Louie, to present the 2023 capital budget.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, residents, and staff. So today we will be continuing the conversation surrounding the township's 2023 capital budget program that began at the special meeting of council last week. So I will provide an overview of the changes made as a result of the last meeting and direction from council. Staff are happy to address any additional questions regarding specific projects following the overview, with the intent that the capital projects identified will be approved during this meeting so that staff can begin the tendering and procurement process on the approved projects. So in the preparation of the budget, each department assesses their needs to continue operations at the current service levels. The budget presented before you today are needs as determined by the department heads. So with that in mind, projects that have been or will be deferred, removed, or modified in any scope will appear in future budgets before you for consideration unless the needs or service levels were to change. So on this slide, you can see a summary of the changes. So I'll just go through them briefly. So A3, which is the municipal facilities, that one was reduced with the direction to remove the flagpole. B5, which is the fire fleet, which is the apparatus. So this one was removed with the motion to defer to the 2024 budget. B6, which is the radio system phase 2, so it has increased by $10,000. This was circulated at the last meeting, but the pricing came in after the original council agenda package was published on the website, so I just wanted to outline that there. C1, which is the road resurfacing program, so that one has been reduced by the amount as Gents Road. Staff were directed to defer the Gents Road project and to incorporate the Bellevue Beach and Hill Road project with or without grant opportunities. So as noted, staff is still going to pursue any grant opportunities or alternative funding strategies, but it was council's desire at the last meeting that this project proceed regardless if we were unsuccessful of securing any alternative funding sources. And C3, which is the bridge repairs, so this has increased by $125,000, and that's as a result of the tender process closing. That's on our joint bridge with West Lincoln, the Pearson Bridge. So this slide here is just kind of a capital budget snapshot. So it's just been modified from the previous slide from the budget last day. So it captures the changes, so it's a reduction to facilities and buildings, fleet and equipment, and to the roads and bridges categories. So again, this one's just a little bit of a visual, the same information, so it just outlines the total project cost by category. And again, this one is the capital project financing, so just a visual. So there has been a shift as the funding source outlined or proposed in the new package, or revised package rather, is to debenture the beach, the Bellevue Beach and Hill Road project if no alternative funding sources can be secured. So there's an increase to the debenture line there. So that's the change on this one. Again, this slide is just to reiterate the importance of the commitment to the infrastructure levy. So just a reminder what the 2023 contribution to the infrastructure levy is. And then this would be the debenture considerations with Bellevue Beach added in and the tandem truck as left in from previous day. So that's the end of the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if there's any questions regarding any specific projects, then we can direct those to the department heads.
Councillor Anderson.
Through you, Mayor Grant, to my colleagues, and particularly Mallory, I'm just wondering if we would consider going forward before we discuss projects in and projects out, however that ends up, that we look at softening the levy against taxpayers by reducing Table 1, which is 2.49, mellowing that out to 2%, which should be a sinking fund ratio that we should try to maintain. I would say that we shouldn't go lower than that, and that we also asked the treasurer in final analysis that she also looks at the sustainability fund for possibly some relief against taxes from there. But that will be up to the treasurer to do kind of a final fiscal for us. Thank you.
So through the mayor to Councillor Anderson and all of council. So certainly if it's council's desire, we can draw a little bit more from the infrastructure reserve to soften that 2.49 down to the 2%. I am in agreement. I would not like to go below the 2%. As we know, inflation is significantly higher, and the cost of all of our projects, we'll just be putting ourselves too far behind the 8 ball if we reduce that lower than 2, but I would be comfortable to reduce that to 2. So adding 39,000, an additional 39,000 coming from the reserves would then soften that number to 1.99%.
So, Councillor Anderson, just to clarify, are you putting a motion forward to reduce that number from 2.49 to the 2% you just spoke to?
Sure, let's go with the motion. I'd like to motion that we consider reducing the 0.49. Thank you.
Reducing to 2% from 2.49.
Reduce out the 0.49.
Okay, so can I get a mover and a seconder on that? Oh, you're the mover, so I just need a seconder on that. Councillor Gilmore? Yep. Okay, let's open it up for discussion. Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Mallory, we haven't had any, there's yet to be any draw from development charges on any capital project. Is there a reason for that? And if so, what is it? And are you anticipating using some of those on the other side as well? Or I find it odd that none of these would attract any ability to use any development charges whatsoever.
So through the mayor to Councillor Gilmore, so development charges have to be used for specific purposes. They have to be identified projects that were considered during the development charge study that has taken place, and the amount that can be allocated towards specific replacements or projects is based on historical spending of DCs and collection of DCs. With that being said, I have been in consultation with the consultants that performed our review, and there are a couple of projects which we will see coming through on the operating side of things, a couple of studies that we have to undertake this year that are eligible to use DCs for, as well as the central station. We are allowed to apply some of the DCs for that. So the rules are a bit specific in terms of it has to be directly attributable to growth. So that kind of restricts us, even if the projects are identified. We're limited a little bit in what we can, in the projects that we can actually allocate it to. So we have been working closely with them for opportunities for us to be able to reallocate these funds that we've already collected and put them forward towards appropriate capital projects.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm painfully aware of a lot of what you said from previous discussions. My question then, I'll save my question when it's in order. I don't want to complicate the motion, so I do want to ask another question about DCs.
All right, we still have the motion on the floor to reduce from 2.49% to 2%. Is there any other discussion? Councilor McCollum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so dropping for 2.49 to 2%, we still have to add another 2% on for the, if we hammer down on this, we're still at 4% just on capital projects, right? So Okay, I get what she's saying, but I just wanted to make sure we're all aware we're still at 4% there.
Okay, any other discussion on it? All right, so call the question. Oh, Councilor McClellan, of course.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I made mention of this at the budget meeting, and I'm going to bring it up again. Until we know what operating costs are, we know what just happened and closed and where we are with that, so there's a cost increase there. I still say right now, we approve this in principle the way it sits, but depending on what operations comes out at, anything and everything on this is open for debate if we have to get down low enough. I don't want to say, yeah, we're approving this now, and then we find out we've got another 8% coming at us from operations. So I guess I'll ask for a motion that we'll agree on that. Oh, okay, so Joan's got a motion up. I'll have to wait till that one's done.
She's got her motion up, so we'll
Yep.
finish with that one first. Okay. So any other discussion on Joan's motion or on Councillor Anderson's? Councillor Anderson.
I'd just like to clarify to my colleagues that I think we'll be looking for some levy relief and a little bit of movement out of infrastructure to keep our sinking fund at 2% and start a cultural habit of doing that. I think we should start here the first year, and I think we should maintain that regiment of a 2%. So I'm just looking to bring the 2% in. The 39,000, when we get to the big numbers at the end of the day, is probably going to be a very, very, very soft relief. Thank you.
Other questions or comments on it? All right, so I'll call the question on Councillor Anderson's motion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And now to you, Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, then I'm going to make a motion that, yes, we pass this in principle, but until we get to operations, it's all in principle. If we find out operations is throwing us a serious curveball and a high increase, everything on here is open for debate.
Can I get a, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah, so can I get a seconder on Councillor McClellan? Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's open the floor to discussion, and we'll start with you, Councillor Gilmore.
Do you want to go ahead? Our speeches will probably be the same.
Council, just on the notion of approving it in principle versus approving it. I guess one of the key things, or one of the key reasons that staff came to you with the capital budget much earlier this year is the sort of capital marketplace that we're dealing with right now, and the need for us to try and get projects out and tendered and processes moving early, such that we're able to either get capital equipment in potentially by year end, which is facing lots of delays, or getting consultants on board, getting projects tendered and awarded so that projects can proceed. The concern with, and again, at this stage, staff are prepared to literally within the next 48 hours begin work on preparing tenders, issuing tenders, getting requests for proposals, doing all of that work and getting that out so that we are in a position to be able to move quickly to implement these capital projects. In the event that council sort of approves only in principle and retains the ability of withdrawing some of these projects, if we've already gone to tender or have already sort of moved towards a procurement, you are sort of potentially delaying things. I do know that the intent of council is to approve the entire budget in early March, the operating budget in early March. End of March, I'm sorry. So, apologies, thank you, end of March. So delaying the capital projects and the implementation of them until the end of March really does put us behind the 8 ball and really does sort of completely dislocate this capital effort that we're undertaking early this year. I don't know, perhaps the treasurer can add to that and then let council sort of debate or consider it further.
So through the mayor to all of council. So yeah, just to kind of build on what William said. So the intent really is to try to move forward with the projects, to try to secure contractors, hopefully secure some competitive pricing in the process, and to be able to complete the capital projects before year end, which will put us in a time crunch. The later in the year we start the tendering process and we start the process on some of these projects. Again, to reiterate the importance of the 2% in the capital levy and the importance of the 2% in the infrastructure levy, cutting those at the expense of operating inflationary pressures is kind of the steps that have been taken in the past, and the reason that we've been faced with some larger increases in the past years. And it's happening across the board. The region, our local municipalities, they're increasing the same increases that everyone's experiencing in the household, in their own personal households, which I understand that is complicating the fact that this could potentially be an increase as well. However, we don't get discounts on any of our services as well. So we're experiencing increased costing on our end. So there is the opportunity whereby if council goes through the projects and they're okay with the projects, they approve the capital projects, and at operating time we could revisit the funding allocation, which could impact the levy contribution, which I think is what Councillor McClellan is trying to address. So this would be the time where if there's any specific projects that council has any questions about or would like to defer or would like to reintroduce back into the budget, now would be the time to do that or to ask those questions and to hear staff's input on that. That's
Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That's really not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is we've got a gun to our head now. Quite frankly, these things should be done in November of last year, and we should have had both budgets in front of us before we pass it. You're asking me to sign a half blank check, and the other check you're going to hand to me, and I got to pay whatever it comes out to. That's not the way it should work. We should have all this information in front of us. If you're worrying about this, Will, and sure, Pearson Road Bridge, we're going to do it. Bellevue Beach, we're going to do it. Put it out. The repairs to the arena, sure, we're going to do them. Everything else is fluff, and we don't need to get that done. The water repair on the town hall, yes, we have to do that. But there's a lot of stuff in here that we can live another year without doing. And I don't want to raise taxes another 8% or 9%. And you're telling us not to use what's in the reserves to eat that up. I get it. That's the wrong thing to do. So we've got to cut somewhere. We're committed to do the bridge. We're committed to do Bellevue Beach. We're committed to do the water system for the town hall. Pickup trucks, snow plows, riding lawnmowers, trailers. That's all stuff. It's fluff. It's stuff you can do without for another year. It won't destroy the town. But raising taxes on people that much is an issue, especially when I don't know what's coming at us on the other half. And, you know, you can say, okay, I'm putting you in a hard spot. Staff has put us all in a hard spot because we don't have all the information in front of us. And we have asked for this more than 1 year to get it up to us before the end of the year. It doesn't happen. Some other municipalities seem to be able to do it. I don't feel bad for this.
Yeah, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think the treasurer summarized most of my thoughts, but I would just caution us about tinkering too much with on the capital side, because the reason we're here, largely the reason that we're here, is a lack of forethought on councils previous, a long time ago, who gave us lots of 0, 0, 0 and put us behind every year. Now, I'm not here to second guess why they did that or anything, but with a little bit of visionary thinking at that time, we'd have had all the money that we would have ever needed and trying to figure out ways to spend it. Now we're between a rock and a hard place. Yes, this is a difficult year. There's no two ways about it. This is an extraordinary year. We've got resources that we can use after we get everything, and to mitigate that. That has its own set of risks that we're going to have explained to us, I'm sure, between now and then. Because, so on the capital side, I've just, I made a mistake one time in a previous term of not totally understanding it. I totally understand it now. I also totally understand the stressors of raising taxes on the community. But when it comes to getting stuff done, I mean, if we're to do anything, we're to get stuff done. Unfortunately, operational pressures always tend to counteract during the term, but it may not be the right thing to do. So, but we always, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we always reserve that right to do things in the middle of a term. It's not a good idea, but we can do it. But let's not, let's not do things out of order and cause ourselves more long-term pain than we already have because of decisions that other groups have made. That's all.
If I may, I agree with you. There was a lot of mistakes made over the years. But the last 4 years we've put our money into this. I'm not saying don't put the 2% in. What I'm worried about is we don't know what operations is coming at us with. And there's no trim in operations. There's nothing you can do there. They're going to tell us what it is, and that's it. Well, we're not going to start dismissing people and getting rid of it. So there's only one way to do this, and Terry, I get it. I agree with you. But at some point, you got to put a brake on a little bit to get it. So we I heard you guys raised my taxes 20%, 22% over, and I heard it 100 times if I heard it once while we were going. I don't want to do the same thing, 9% this year, 10% next year, and before we know it, we'll be at 40%. And it wasn't people that were marginal in this community that was going at it. It was some of the wealthier people in town that were going at me over it. So, somewhere there's got to be a happy medium somewhere in this list. Believe me, I'm the first guy that wants to build anything in here, and you know that. So, but I'm biting my tongue on this till we find out what the other one's coming at me.
Councilor Wainfleet?
Thank you. Actually, I forget what I was going to say now. I don't see any value in only approving this in principle because I don't actually see what the point is. If we don't approve it, nothing gets done. If we do it in principle, nothing gets done. Don't yell at me. The region is already looking at over a 9% interest hike. I mean, tax hike, sorry, I'm tired. But we don't have any other sources. And unfortunately, we only have our taxes to pull from. I don't want to raise anybody's taxes either, but we have to. And as Councillor Gilmore said, in the past, we were so happy for the last 30 years that our taxes never went up. Some years, my taxes didn't go up a dime. And unfortunately, now we have to pay the piper, or our town's just going to crumble. There's no way around it. I don't believe there's anything in here that's fluff. We've taken out a lot of stuff. I think we might actually suffer from some of the stuff that we've taken out. Like the fire truck we took out, for instance, didn't affect the levy at all, had nothing to do with raising anybody's taxes if we looked at how we were paying for it, and we took that out. So I don't really understand what's fluff. If you look at the levy, how we're actually using the tax money and the other sources of income. So I'm not going to go along with your motion, and that's fine. That's just how we're going to go. I would like to approve this so we can bring the operating budget, take a look at it, find out what the region's going to be at, do our blended rate. From what I've been heard, we might be sitting at, and Mallory, correct me if I'm wrong, blended maybe 5%, 6%.
So through the mayor to all of council, it's too soon to tell at this point what the blended rate would be, and the regional one is just going for consideration on Thursday. Once we know what theirs is and we have a draft operating, then we'll be able to have a better picture of what our blended would be.
Okay, so yeah, if we look at the way we're paying for things, if you actually look at what's coming out of the levy and what's in reserves and what's the modernization fund, like, there's not a lot to pick out of here. We've already took a bunch of stuff out. We could put stuff back in that doesn't affect the levy, as far as I'm concerned, but that's for us to discuss.
Councillor Anderson.
I just think, to my colleagues, I think we have to be cognizant of the next 3 or 4 years. I think we're going to see 1 or 2 years, possibly past this one, where levy stressors for everyone are going to remain reasonably high. So we could see a relief next year of 2 or 3%. It'll just soften because of the nature of how the economy is moving, among other things. But if we don't, in my mind, and I'm a neophyte this year, but in my mind, what we don't spend now that we push to the future carries with that carrying charges, cost increases of the product or whatever we're looking at. And so what we're doing is we're maybe saving money this year for Peter, but we're going to have to pay Paul some extra money next year. And next year isn't going to be easy either. So I'm for setting a trend, I hope, in my term of council, that we buy things and we fix things. And we do that with considerate moderation of the levy. But we can't back off of not buying and not procuring and not fixing. It's just what we should be doing. It's tough. It's not going to be easy. People aren't going to like it. Maybe some of us here might not like it. But somehow we have to get to a capital agreement and expenditures that facilitate service quality, long-term sort of better debenture rates, or open up the field for further debentures 2 years from now. So I just wish we'd look at a little longer game than just looking at this long piece of paper in front of us. This is just a start to what we're going to do in our term. Thank you.
Anybody else with any comments or questions?
Just through your chair. Brilliant, and I agree with you 100%.
And I'll add my own comments. Like, in all honesty, every one of my colleagues is right. Not one of you has said anything that's not true. Coming into this, I thought, we're going to, looking at it from the outside, all I wanted to do was make cuts and be able to lower people's taxes. Obviously, the world is in a really hard place, and there's increases going everywhere. But I still, and Terry says in his first terms, he made mistakes. Maybe it's because I'm new in office, and I, want to make those same mistakes, not knowingly. But as far as what Councillor McCullen says, Right now, I have to agree that it is a really, really tough time, and no matter what we do, my fear is the people that live in this town, and there are many of them that are struggling to stay in this town, are going to be in this very future or nearest future are going to find themselves not being able to live here. They are going to be forced out of this town. Of course, new residents are going to move in, but with new residents, are we going to lose our character at what makes Wainfleet Wainfleet? And that is what I'm concerned about. I have to lean more towards Councillor McCullen that I'm very cautious about our increases just because we don't know where we're going to finally end up, right? We talk about 5% blended, 6% blended. What if we are at a 9% blended? There's people that aren't going to be able to afford that. You're going to see homes across Wainfleet going up for sale. That's just the bottom line. That's my opinion. All right, and there is still a motion on the floor. So if there's no other further discussion, I guess we'll call the question. All in favor of Councillor McCullen's motion? Oh, no other further discussion, right? Nope. Okay. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's defeated. All right, we're just going back over to any more discussion on the budget. Councillor Gilmore.
I guess now is the appropriate time to ask my DC question. So, I was just wondering if the CAO has any current information regarding the, I don't know what word to use, but the redeployment of development charges going forward in light of the bill that was passed regarding in which development charges are alluded to, but like it's convoluted. But at some point, this fund has got to be made so that municipalities can use it the way they want to use it, not the way that some consultant says we can use it, or anybody that couldn't find Wainfleet without a cell phone says we can use it. Like, we have to be able to use our own money the way we want to use it. So I just would like to know if there's anything new there.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, as the treasurer indicated earlier, the key principle behind development charges is that development is to pay for development, and any sort of development-related expenditures that the township experiences as a result of development, development charges are intended to help offset those costs in very specific ways. As indicated, every time a municipality undertakes a development charges study, it examines its history of development, its history of costs associated with past development, and it identifies future projects or future areas where it anticipates expenditures to be coming with respect to that development, so that the development charges you collect can be allocated towards those types of expenses. So for example, the development of a new fire hall, the construction of a new fire hall, which we are currently in the process of doing. That a portion of that fire hall's costs and a portion of that fire hall's functionality is attributable to growth that has occurred in the township. Not a heck of a lot of it, because we haven't had a lot of growth historically, but a portion of it is. And a portion of the cost of that new fire hall, therefore, we will be able to draw and rely on development charges to offset, to pay towards. We have a variety of other projects, and again, it's a matter of pulling out the development charges review that was undertaken just the other year to identify the various targets of development charges. But honestly, the sort of ability to use those at council's complete and utter discretion is something that by law currently doesn't exist. And in fact, recent changes through Bill 23 and was it 119, 109, thank you, have actually even further curtailed or required municipalities to further narrow down the use of development charges moving forward. Again, those are new acts that literally came into effect just around election time last year. And the actual devil is in the details with a lot of these things, with regulations and other sort of directives that are still coming out of the province, are still being examined and trying to be identified how they will be implemented by municipalities. So long story short, I guess in response to the councillor, yes, it would be very nice to be able to have much more flexibility. Under the current development charges regime, though, we have very strict rules for the application of those development charges that we collect, and they're actually only getting stricter with the newer regulations and a new legislation that's coming down. I don't think I answered your question in the way you wanted it, but bottom line is we are in a highly regulated environment with respect to development charges, and it is one that unfortunately there's not a lot of leeway in.
Well, all that does is reaffirm my desire to think of a new model rather than this hocus pocus that doesn't apply or work in Wainfleet. And if you've been paying attention, I give this speech fairly often, but nothing's changed. We got all this money tied up in there. Every 5 years, we have to spend the money that 5 people in the township who build a house, we have to spend that money for a consultant to tell us the same thing that he told us 5 years ago. We do that every year. So every year, one family that builds a house contributes all their money to a consultant. It's hocus pocus. It's time to think of a new model, some other way, because growth, we don't experience it. 200-300 people, yeah, but you can't justify building something that you can actually take your own money and use. The fire hall is a one-off, like, thankfully, but there again, there's 600K sitting in there. We can't use only a small portion of it. 60, 80,000, 100,000 maybe. The rest of it's going to sit there until some other bureaucrat decides that we can dribble a little bit out for some other project. It's nonsense. Yeah, we need revenue, okay, but generate revenue in a way that we can use it. Not this goofy stuff and the fact that we have to spend a whole bunch of money every 5 years on a consultant just torques me right up. Because that's money that families they might as well just go burn it in the stove. It accomplishes nothing. The guy doesn't tell us one new thing from one 5-year period to the next. I have learned nothing other than we should have never started this in the first place, which is where I was at when we started it. So, I mean, I don't know. It's just crazy that we can't manage our own money the way we want to manage it. Yeah, okay, collect them, but let us use them. I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, we're between a rock and a hard place in this municipality. And our ability to sustain this lifestyle is got a very finite window. That I know for sure. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Councillor Wainfleet.
Through you, Chair. I'm going to get you a T-shirt, Councillor Gilmore, just says DC on it. So what if we use that money? What's going to happen to us? Are they going to fine us? Are they going to take more of the money that we're not allowed to use? Like, what's the worst case scenario if we use our own money? Anybody? Like, what are they, like, it's our money.
The government of Ontario does have means to sanction municipalities that fail to comply with provincial laws, such as Development Charges Act. There's a whole broad range of them. I'm not sure that I can get into them all here and now, but suffice it to say that every year we do receive grants, for example, from the province of Ontario to help support our operations. There is a potential that failing to comply with certain laws might result in similar sort of sanctions against the municipality. Again, keeping in mind the province is sort of ultimately in charge of all municipalities. They do ultimately hold the purse strings and the ability to control what we do. So there is an obligation for the municipality to comply with the laws. So.
Okay, so what you're saying is if we use our own money and go against their rules, they're not going to give us any more money, right? And I also just want to make it clear to the public that this is why we are so frustrated at tax time, because we have all this money, we have all these rules, and we're not allowed to use it. It's extremely frustrating, and we all lose sleep.
Prior to Councillor McClellan jumping in, I would just comment that might be the best case scenario of not receiving any further provincial funds. It goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
I'm trying, though. I'm trying.
Councillor McClellan, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I totally agree with the frustration Councilor Gilmore has. So we get a consultant, he tells us what to do, and we mindlessly follow along because they're supposed to be the boss. I have another thought on this, Will. Is there a chance, and I don't care if you want me to go with you, you want somebody else to go with you, do we get a meeting at Queen's Park and say, hey, listen, this doesn't work in our municipality. We have no water in town. We can't build a water main to go for new growth. We don't have sewer in here. We can't build a sewage treatment plant. We have $600,000, $1 million, whatever the number is, sitting in a bank that we can't touch. And we're beating the daylights out of our taxpayers, and we've got money in the bank. I'll gladly go to Queen's Park with you and make that argument. It won't be my first time there, and I'm sure it won't be my last. So if you want to go, let's go. Well, you stay out of there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. That is a notion, actually, that the mayor and I had some discussions on within the last 2 or 3 weeks when the mayor brought up ideas of alternate revenue sources and opportunities to tap into new and different ways of doing things. So we've started those discussions. It certainly makes sense, and it might be a worthwhile venture. And I think that's something that we had some intention on discussing over coming weeks. So by all means, that's certainly on the table and might be a worthwhile approach to it.
If I could, I would strongly suggest we start going there once a month. Knock on the doors and let them know who the heck we are. I don't mind going. I'll go every other month with you. If you got somebody else you want to take, it doesn't matter, but I think that's something that we should be doing. I said it 4.5 years ago when we first came in office, and I'm saying it again. It's the squeaky wheel that gets greased, and if you go up there, maybe we'll make a friend and we'll have somebody on our side, but you don't know unless you try.
I agree. Any other comments, questions? Oh, Councillor Anderson.
I think my sense of development charges, and Mallory, you could, straighten me out on this. The development charges are applied at a ratio that's indexed every year according to the non-residential something or other, and it's not a lot of money because we don't build a lot of houses. So if we, for example, didn't have development charges, the region will never give them up. So anybody who builds here will always pay regional development charges. That's just a fact. There are two options as I see it, and I'm looking for clarification. I'm not telling people if I'm right or wrong here. We either have development charges, we have to go by the government guardrails, or we don't have development charges. What I like to understand is the fiscal ramifications of that. If we don't have accessibility to those funds, is it a big deal or a no deal? Because we don't use them very much. The other thing is, I think that Councillor Gilmore was right. The last development charge total I saw was $602,000, I believe. And when you delete, and this is what I'm asking Mallory for, if you deleted development charges, I'm not suggesting that, I'm just looking for clarification. When you delete development charges, they are reassigned to their draw. So whatever is balanced in roads would go to roads. Whatever balanced in recs would go to recs, because we have those kinds of reserves. Anything that sits in a development charge that isn't in an already standing reserve becomes general revenue. So if we don't like development charges, some of us believe it's a tax on a tax. We don't like it, we get rid of them. That would be him. If we don't like it, we dissolve them. If we maintain them, we have to go by regulation. There's just no other way around it. So I agree with Terry. Let's look at possible use. Max out the development charges that are payable and move forward. And the other thing I'd like to know is, given the new Bill 23, did we fall into the phased-in element on development charges, or are we static with our number?
So through the mayor to Councillor Anderson and all of council, so since we have a bylaw that's in existence, we are able to collect and spend in accordance with our bylaw. The changes would be implemented upon adoption of a new bylaw for our DC charges. So in 2020, there is 602,000 at year end 2022. So it is allocated. It's a bit cyclical. So it is allocated out by department. It is based on a couple of things, which is DC collections, which were historically low, based on the existing lots being exempt or reduced. It also depends on existing spending in those categories. So that's how the allocations are determined during the study, as well as the amount that you're allowed to allocate for replacement. So if we don't contribute any money into Parks and Rec, let's say, the amount that we're allowed to allocate to specific projects is going to be significantly lower because it's based on historical capital spending. So until we have done capital projects as of recently, but when they're looking at historical data from 4, 8, 10, 12 years ago, they're updating that every 4-year cycle. So there are some projects coming down. The 600 isn't just a pot of money. It is broken down by category. So roads and related, fire protection, parks and rec, library services, and admin. And some of the projects, like I said, we have to do an official plan amendment, which is eligible for DCs. We have to do a road needs study, which is eligible for DCs. Investigating opportunity for some of our portion of the complex to be used from the parks and rec category. The fire protection, we can allocate some towards, likely all of it, because the amount that we're allowed to allocate to that station exceeds the amount that we have sitting in the fire component of the DCs. And roads and related, anytime that there is the road needs study can come from there, as well as if there is a road that needs improved or upgraded in the future near any subdivisions or any growth that's associated with the township, then we could allocate those funds towards that. But they do need to be collected and reported in accordance with the Development Charges Act.
So if I may continue, Mayor. So for my clarity, example, I don't know the numbers. If we had 300,000 balance in roads, does it have a limited draw? Or could we spend the whole 300,000 on an improved road?
So through the mayor to Councillor Anderson, it doesn't have a limited draw, but it has set allocations. So if, based on historical spending, based on our projections of any roads that are in poor condition that we would need to repair and the estimated replacement costs, we're allowed to allocate X amount of dollars per this road or this road. So it's specific based on certain roads, but not necessarily the amount that we're able to draw.
So through you, Mayor, for the clarification. So is there any circumstance where under any of those 5 categories that we have ever or would be ever to draw more than 10% application against that item, that project, et cetera? Have we ever gone over a 10% draw?
So through the mayor to Councillor Anderson, I would have to look back historically what happened prior to me being here. I can say for certain that we will this year with the station and with some of the studies that are coming down, but historically, I wouldn't want to speculate. I would probably not, because we weren't collecting at 100%, and like I said, it's specific projects and based on historical spending, so
I just might suggest, and this isn't gospel, but we'd be hard-pressed to have ever drawn 10%, given our capital spending anyway. So our capital spending limits our draw. If we're not fixing, we're not buying, we're not improving, we're not drawing. That's just part of the hay wagon. So do we want development charges? Do we not want development charges? Do we go this year and draw as much as we possibly can? I believe the development charges were redone in 2021. So that lets us out of that June 1st Government Bill 23 phase-in thing, so we can stay with our maximum number. But having been a previous gallery attender, I've watched the development charges discussion over and over and over. So does this council want to make a decision? Or do we just want to go forward and use development charges as they can be applied? Because I think that's the question that comes to the floor all the time. How good are they? What are they for? How do we use them? And do we want to charge them and put at this point, $8,000 development charge just from us on every house that's built? Do we want to do that? Because that's what we're doing. I think I'm done.
Any further discussion? No comments? Councillor Wainfleet, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. We're at a stalemate here, so we have to either approve this, which we have to, we didn't approve the budget. Oh. Can we just note that he interrupted me, just saying? Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm really tired. I'm sure everybody else is as well. If we don't approve this tonight, we're going to be how far behind, Mal? If we don't get these out for pricing for the projects.
Oh, through the mayor to Councillor Wainfleet, that's hard to say based on the project. Some of the tender processes could be lengthy. I wouldn't want to speculate. That's more Richard and Morgan that deal with that side of things. But I mean, like the fact that it's coming back before council for approval March 21st would allude that construction will be starting in some municipalities when we're getting tenders out.
Okay, so I think I just throw it out there. Is there anything else in this capital budget that we want to take out or put back in? Because we're just talking about development charges, which we can do that another meeting. We're not going to do anything with it right now, are we? So, and I appreciate the conversation. It's great. I seem to hear it a lot. Terry's educated me quite well on it. But we're at a bit of a stalemate here, and I just need to see the budget. What did you say? Anyway, he said we need to move this forward, so let's get moving here.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? As Councillor Van Fleet said, is there anything anybody wants to see pulled from the budget? No. Okay. Then, yeah, we have the motion on the. Yeah. Okay. Then we have the motion that the presentation by the treasurer regarding the draft 2023 capital budget be received, and whereas at its meeting held January 31st, 2023 and February 7th, 2023, the Council of the Township of Wainfleet has considered and evaluated the capital requirements for the township to ensure the efficient delivery of municipal services to the ratepayers of the Township of Wainfleet. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the 2023 capital budget expenditures of $5,062,891 be approved. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Gilmore, seconder. Councillor Van Fleet. Any further discussion? Okay, then I'm just going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Now we're going. Shut that up. Okay, we're going to move on to the review of correspondence. We're starting with C 2023-033, Winger Public School request for waiving of community hall rental fees. Is there any discussion respecting the request for rental fees to be waived at the community hall? Any discussion? Any councillors?
Just a point of technical clarification. When council receives requests to waive fees, if council is supportive of the request, the person who has made the request does not have to pay the fees for the use of the facility. However, there is actually a cost to the municipality for the use of that space, and the the department that is responsible for the operation of that facility still does receive reimbursement for the value of the facility being used, and that reimbursement comes from a specific account that exists within council's budget. So it's actually a discretionary grant that council is giving to the organization to offset the fees that they would otherwise pay. And that's basically for the new members of council.
Any questions or comments regarding this? No? Okay, Councillor Gilmore moves to waive it. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Van Fleet? Any other discussion? Okay, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? So that's carried. Okay, yep. I have a motion that the following bylaws be read and passed this 7th day of February 2023. Bylaw number 005/2023, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Wainfleet for the current term of council. Second, bylaw number 006-2023, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Township of Wainfleet Public Library Board for the current term of council. Third one, bylaw number 007-2023, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 042-2010, being a bylaw to adopt municipal and private road names in the Township of Wainfleet. And then lastly, bylaw number 008-2023, being a bylaw to repeal bylaw number 033-2015, being a bylaw to establish a policy for the sale of land owned by the Township of Wainfleet. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Oh, first I have to call the motion. Yeah, okay. Councillor McCullen, Councillor Gilmore. Any discussion? Okay, then I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Are there any notice of motion from members of council? Yeah, it's cool. I got it. Okay, then I have a motion that council now move into closed session to discuss item under section 239 2B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. One item, consideration of applicants to the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee. Under second item under section 239 2C of the Municipal Act 2001, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. Two items, potential disposition of land matter and a potential acquisition of land matter. Minutes of the closed meeting of council held January 10th, 2023. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Gilmore, Councillor McCollum. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. So we'll now move into closed session.